Good evening. I'm Lynn Komansky, President of the League of Women Voters of Washtenaw County, and I want to welcome all of you to tonight's town hall about ballot proposals and the election process. This presentation is for education purposes. I'm joined this evening by Sandra Serini-Elzer, our League of Women Voters Washtenaw County Advocacy Director, and Chris Buffington, our League of Women Voters of Washtenaw County Board Secretary and Voting Rights Co-Chair. We are representing the League of Women Voters of Michigan Education Fund Board for this presentation. Tonight, we will give a brief overview of the 3 statewide ballot proposals on the November 8th ballot. A summary of all 3 proposals was included with your registration link. This will be a good reference tool to have as we go over the proposals. And because there is a heightened interest in election security these days, we'll also briefly cover Michigan election laws. This presentation is brought to you by the League of Women Voters Education Fund, which works to register and provide voters with election information through our election resource, vote411.org, printed voter guides, candidate forums, and debates. The League never supports or opposes candidates or political parties. As this is an educational presentation, we are presenting both sides of the issues as best as possible. If you have questions that come up, please put them in the chat. And after the recording of the presentation, we will try to address them or answer them in the chat for you. In the event that we run out of time, we will respond through email to any questions which we did not get to. Thank you again for attending. As this is an educational presentation, we are presenting both sides of the issues as best as possible. First off, what's on the ballot? In addition to the 3 ballot proposals, there are several statewide offices on the ballot. These are the U.S. House of Representatives, Governor and Lieutenant Governor, Secretary of State, Attorney General, State Supreme Court, University Boards, State Senator, State Representative, and the 3 ballot proposals. Many communities will have local offices and possibly local proposals on the ballot as well. These can include the County Board of Commissioners, the clerk, city or township officials, and school boards. We are fortunate in Michigan to have a constitution that gives 2 powers to the voters that not all states provide. 24 different states have these. The first power is called legislative initiative and gives voters the right, if certain conditions are met, to initiate laws. The second power is to amend the Michigan Constitution. For a constitutional amendment, nothing in the Constitution may be altered without the approval of the voters. Any action by the legislature to amend the Constitution must be placed on the ballot. There are 3 statewide ballot proposals to amend the Constitution that all Michiganders will be voting on this November. They are transparency and term limits, which is Proposal 1, promote the vote 2022, which is Proposal 2, and reproductive freedom for all, which is Proposal 3. Please note, if any of these pass, they go into effect 45 days after it was approved by the voters. We'll begin with Proposal 1, transparency and term limits. So this proposal was placed on the ballot by a 2/3 vote of the Michigan legislature. Therefore, no signatures were required. I will be reading the summary of the proposal as you see it on the ballot. Please refer to the handout which you received with your link. That has the ballot summaries for each of the 3 proposals. This proposed constitutional amendment would require members of the legislature, governor, lieutenant governor, secretary of state, and attorney general file annual public financial disclosure reports after 2023, including assets, liabilities, income sources, future employment agreements, gifts, travel reimbursements, and positions held in organizations, except religious, social, and political organizations. It will require legislature implement, but not limit or restrict reporting requirements. It will replace current term limits for state representatives and state senators with a 12-year total limit in any combination between House and Senate, except a person elected to Senate in 2022 may be elected the number of times allowed when that person became a candidate. Should this proposal be adopted? Yes or no? The entire wording for the constitutional amendment is available at the State Board of Canvassers website or Transparency and Term Limits website. And these will be dropped into the chat for you. So currently, there are no reporting requirements for state officials. Michigan legislature has failed to pass any legislation regarding financial transparency for elected officials. Michigan's current legislative term limits permit 3 terms in the House of Representatives, 6 years, and 2 terms in the Senate, 8 years, for a total of 14. Michigan has had term limits over the last 30 years, adopted in 1992 by voters. In the 1990s, numerous states adopted term limits for state offices. Federal offices were not included because it would have had to be an amendment to the US Constitution. 15 states have term limits now. Michigan is one of 5 states that has lifetime limits. The 10 others have limits in consecutive serving. And there is a link that we'll put in the chat where you can go and look up term limits in the different states in the US. So supporters, Michigan and Idaho are the only 2 states in the country that do not require personal financial disclosure by their state elected officials. This is a major reason for the Center for Public Integrity ranking the state of Michigan 50th in the nation in transparency. The Michigan legislature has discussed various bills to require elected officials to report their finances, but none have passed. Disclosures, if passed, beginning in 2024, elected state legislative and state executive officials must file annual financial disclosure reports on their income, assets, liabilities, gifts from lobbyists, positions held in certain organizations, and agreements on future employment with the Secretary of State. Term limits. After 2022, persons could not be elected to terms in the Michigan House of Representatives or Senate for terms that total more than 12 years. A person could serve 12 years in the Michigan Senate, 3 4-year terms, or 12 years in the Michigan House of Representatives, 6 2-year terms, or other combination of terms that do not exceed 12 years. A 12-year lifetime limit would keep the benefits of term limits, but would also allow House members to focus on the serious work of legislation in the chamber where they were elected. Gone would be the pressure to immediately start seeking their next position. Some supporters include the American Federation of Teachers of Michigan, Femmes for Dems, League of Women Voters of Michigan, Michigan Chamber of Commerce, Michigan Education Association, Michigan Farm Bureau, Michigan Manufacturers Association, Michigan Realtors, Michigan Regional Council of Carpenters and Millwrights, and Sierra Club. And these are just some of the supporters. More are listed on the website. Opponents say, critics of the proposal have attacked the rapid vote state lawmakers cast in May to place the measure on the ballot November 8th, calling it an ambush. They have argued the proposal is drafted by politicians and lobbyists who make money off of connection to government. Some people oppose term limits completely and would rather see them eliminated. Opponents include Term Limits Defense Fund, U.S. term limits. And again, we'll put the link to that in the chat. We will move on next to Promote the Vote 2022 Proposal 2. And I'm going to hand it off to Chris Buffington, who will speak about this proposal. Chris?
Thank you, Lynn. So Promote the Vote 2022 is a proposal to amend the Constitution to add provisions regarding elections. It is designed to help make voting more accessible. Number one, to recognize a fundamental right to vote with harassment or threatening conduct. Require military or overseas ballots be counted if postmarked by election day. In the past, it had to be received by election day in order for those to be counted. It provides voters the right to verify their identity if they, with their photo ID or by making a signed statement and affidavit confirming their identity. It provides the voter the right to a single application to vote absentee in all elections, so they wouldn't have to refill that request out for each election. It requires state-funded absentee ballot drop boxes to make it convenient for people to vote, and postage already provided on the absentee applications and ballots. It provides that only election officials may conduct post-election audits and require 9 days, so it expands it to 9 days of early in-person voting. It also continues to allow, as protected by the Constitution, if this passes, for donations and to fund elections and for volunteers to participate in certain aspects. It requires canvassing boards to certify election results based only on the official records of the votes cast. Currently, as things stand, in 2018, Michigan voters passed Proposal 3 in 2000, that expanded voting rights and voting access and protected those expansions in the Michigan Constitution. Michigan right now has various laws that regulate voting, including some of the laws that we're trying to protect in this ballot, that is trying to be protected in this ballot proposal, but that they can be changed by the legislation. So by making it a constitutional amendment, that'll be something that can only be changed by the voters in Michigan. So supporters say that Promote the Vote will help ensure that every voice is heard and that every vote is counted in every election, no matter what political party or candidate people support, where they live, who they are, what they look like. It will, supporters say, that it enhances election integrity and increases election security by modernizing and providing resources to help administer elections to ensure every vote counts. And that will make voting more convenient and accessible for Michiganders of all backgrounds. So some of the supporters of the Promote the Vote 2022 ballot proposal is the ACLU, the American Federation of Teachers of Michigan, Common Cause, Equality Michigan, Gray Panthers, the League of Women Voters of Michigan, the Michigan AFL-CIO, the NAACP, and Voters Not Politicians. Opponents say that this measure would open the doors to abuse, and also opponents have been opposed to wide expansions of absentee voting because they have a concern of security and cost. Some of the opponents include Defend Your Ballot, Unborn Equity and Voting Integrity, Secure My Vote, and Stand Up Michigan. And as Lynn stated earlier, we will put some of these links in if people wish to gather further information. Next slide, and it might be the one where I'm passing it on to my colleague. So Sandra Soranisla, on to you.
Hi, thank you so much, Chris. Now we're going to talk about Proposal 3. I'm Sandy Serini Elzer, and I'm Head of Advocacy for League of Women Voters of Washtenaw County. So Proposal 3, the supporters turned in, I just want you to know, supporters turned in over 753,000 signatures to get this proposal on the ballot. And that's almost double the number of signatures that's needed. The text on the slide that you see here is the first paragraph of the language that will appear on the ballot. And as Lynn mentioned, you can read the ballot language for each proposal in the handout we sent to everybody who registered for this presentation. So let's go through this a little quickly. It's pretty short. Reproductive Freedom for All is a proposal to amend the state constitution to establish a new individual right to reproductive freedom, including the right to make all decisions about pregnancy and abortion, allow the state to regulate abortion in some cases, and forbid prosecution of individuals exercising the established right. So the balance of the ballot language that will be on your ballot for Proposal 3, you can read along with me. I'm just going to run through it pretty quickly. It's on your handout. The proposed constitutional amendment would establish a new individual right to reproductive freedom, including the right to make and carry out all decisions about pregnancy, such as prenatal care, childbirth, postpartum care, contraception, sterilization, abortion, miscarriage management, and infertility. The proposal will also allow the state to regulate abortion after fetal viability, but not prohibit it if medically needed to protect a patient's life or physical or mental health. It would forbid the state from discriminating in enforcement of this right, and it would prohibit prosecution of an individual or a person helping a pregnant individual exercise the rights established by the amendment, and it invalidates certain state laws conflicting with this amendment. And finally, the ballot language says, should this proposal be adopted, yes or no? And the entire wording for the constitutional amendment is available on the Reproductive Freedom for All website, and you'll get a link to that in the chat. So currently, what is the law on abortion? It is a little confusing. So as you probably all know, on June 24th, 2022, the U.S. Supreme Court in Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization overturned the landmark Roe versus Wade decision decided by a 6-3 vote. Almost a half a century ago, Roe versus Wade created the basis for establishing a constitutional right to abortion, and the Dobbs case overturned that. The Dobbs ruling means that states have to decide what the law will be regulating abortion on a state-by-state basis, so it'll change from state to state. In Michigan, there happens to be a 1931 law that bans abortion, but the courts have recently issued an injunction on that law that stops enforcement. So abortions with certain restrictions are still allowed for now. And just to give you a couple of facts about abortions in Michigan, as you can see on the slide, in 2020, 18% of all pregnancies in Michigan resulted in abortions, and 15% of all pregnancies ended in miscarriage. Those under 18 accounted for 2% of all abortions in Michigan. And in 2021, approximately 30,000 abortions were performed in Michigan, and 89% of those abortions ended pregnancies of 12 weeks or less. So what do supporters say about why Proposal 3 is needed? So supporters say that important medical decisions should be guided by a patient's health and well-being and not a politician's beliefs. They say that for far too long, politicians across the country have been fighting to restrict reproductive health, and they've been gaining ground. Now that the U.S. Supreme Court has overturned Roe versus Wade, that 1931 Michigan law banning abortions could go back into effect. That would make abortions illegal in Michigan and threaten doctors with prison for up to 15 years for providing an abortion. Supporters also say that Proposal 3 is needed to ensure access to a broad range of reproductive health care. This amendment would make sure no one goes to prison for providing safe medical care. And the supporters also say that when people are able to make their own decisions about their own reproductive health care, including whether and when to have children, they have more control over their life, their health, and their economic security. This measure would ensure that all people in Michigan have the right to safe and respectful care during birthing, the right to use temporary or permanent birth control, the right to continue or end a pregnancy pre-viability, and no one can be punished for having a miscarriage, stillbirth, or abortion. Some supporters include the American Civil Liberties Union of Michigan, the American Association of University Women, American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, Center for Reproductive Rights, League of Women Voters of Michigan, Michigan Nurses Association, Michigan Voices, National Council of Jewish Women, and Planned Parenthood Advocates of Michigan. And you can read about all the supporters on the website for Reproductive Freedom for All. So what do the opponents say about Proposal 3? Opponents say that the 1931 law that bans abortion except to save the life of the mother and makes it a felony to perform an abortion should be the law. Opponents also say that the amendment would repeal dozens of state laws, including our state's ban on tax-funded abortions, the partial birth abortion ban, and fundamentally alter the parent-child relationship by preventing parents from having input on their children's health. And some opponents include Citizens to Support Michigan Women and Children, Advance for Life, West Michigan, American Association of Pro-Life Obstetricians and Gynecologists, Citizens for Traditional Values, Michigan Catholic Conference, Michigan Family Forum, Michigan Knights of Columbus, and Right to Life Michigan. And I think that's my last slide, so I'm going to turn this back to Lynn.
Thank you, Sandy. So now that you've heard about the proposals, I'm going to switch it up a little bit, and we're going to go into the second part of our presentation, which deals with the election process. We'll focus on three key factors: registering to vote, absentee voting, and certification of the election. So in registering to vote, through October 24th, which is 15 days before the election, there are many options for registration. You can do so by mail. You can register in person by going to the Secretary of State's office, your city or township clerk's office, and other voting or voter registration agencies. You can register online, and you can also attend a voter registration drive. From the 14th day before the election, which would begin October 25th, you're able to register in person at the city or township clerk's office or a satellite office, as long as you bring proof of residency, all the way up until 8 p.m. on election day. For absentee voting, absentee ballots will be available on September 29th, which is just around the corner. If you choose to vote absentee in person, you can visit your city or township clerk's office. You'll submit the completed application in person. Your absentee ballot will be provided in person. You would vote the absentee ballot in person and submit the absentee ballot in person to your clerk. These are not counted, however, until election day. Or you can take the absentee ballot home with you, vote at home, and then drop it off or mail it back to your clerk's office. By mail and voting at home, you submit a completed application for an absentee ballot by mail. Then the absentee ballot is provided by mail. Then you vote the absentee ballot and you mail the absentee ballot back or drop it off. One thing to note is that voters must sign the ballot envelope with their official signature in order for the ballot to count. Ballots must be received by 8 p.m. on election day. And the League of Women Voters recommends that if it's getting to be within a couple of weeks of election day and you have not yet turned in an absentee ballot, that you probably would be better off taking it to your clerk's office as opposed to putting it in the mail, just to be assured that it gets there in time. Why would some people vote absentee? Well, there's no lines. You vote in the comfort of your own home. It's busy people, they can vote when it's convenient. No rides are needed, and there's time to study the choices. For the August primary in 2022, State Elections Director Jonathan Brader said around 2.1 million voters participated in the election, and slightly over half of those voted absentee. So it is a very popular option with our voters. Once the election is over, the County Board of Canvassers is charged with certifying the election. How many people are in this? There are 4 members, 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans, with staggered 4-year terms. They are appointed by the County Board of Commissioners from names supplied by the 2 political parties. Their duties: within 14 days of the election, they meet, they review election paperwork from the precincts, making sure all the paperwork is in order. They certify election results in the county, majority vote to certify. They send election certification report to the State Board of Canvassers. All these meetings are open for the public to observe, but not participate. And trained League of Women Voters members observe these meetings and report any irregularities. The State Board of Canvassers has 4 members also, 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans with staggered 4-year terms. They are appointed by the governor from names provided by the 2 political parties. Their duties include: within 6 weeks of the election, they meet to review the election certification reports from the counties. Then they certify those election results, and a majority vote certifies, 3 out of 4 or 4 out of 4. These meetings are also open to the public to observe, but not to participate. And trained League of Women Voters members observe meetings and report any irregularities. So to sum it up, we've covered 3 statewide ballot proposals that will be on the ballot in November. We also talked about how to register to vote in Michigan, how absentee voting works in Michigan, and how elections get certified in the county and state levels. Here are a few of the sites we referred to during this presentation. Michigan Secretary of State, which is www.mi.gov/vote, www.michiganvoting.org, and www.vote411.org. One last thing before we end our presentation for this evening and go to questions in the chat. Before you cast your ballot, we encourage you to check out the League's online voter guide, Vote 411. By entering in your address and zip code, you'll be able to learn about the candidates and issues in your district. You will also have access to all of our League candidate forum videos for the November election, which will be uploaded as soon as they have all taken place. The website again is www.vote411.org. And on behalf of the League of Women Voters of Washtenaw County, I want to thank you very much for joining us this evening.